All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the virtual meetup, Apache Pulsar and Apache Nifi for Cloud Data Lakes, hosted by StreamNative and Cloudera. We'll be starting in a couple of minutes. We're just waiting for people to sign in. In the meantime, please feel free to use the chat function to let us know, 1, where you're calling in from, and 2, what your favorite beer is. While we wait for people to filter in, we'll be launching a poll to help us better understand you and your experience with Pulsar and Nifi a little bit more. So let me just start that poll. All right, again, for those just joining us, we'll be starting in about 5 minutes or so. While we wait for people to filter in, we are starting a poll to help us understand you a little bit more. So the first poll is your familiarity with Pulsar and Nifi. As you can see, there are 2 questions. What is your familiarity with Apache Pulsar and Nifi? Maybe you've heard about us, maybe you're new to it, just getting started. Maybe you've dabbled here and there. Maybe you've been using Pulsar and Nifi for some time now, or maybe you're an expert. We'd love to know. And again, if you're just coming in and maybe you've already done the poll, feel free to use the chat function, again, to let us know where you're calling in from and what your favorite beer is. Great, so we have a couple more questions coming up. So I'm going to end this poll and share the results. Don't worry if you didn't take part in this, we have more polls coming up. Great, so it sounds like, wow, we have a good mix of people here. Some people have heard about Pulsar and Nifi, at least familiar with it, but we don't have any experts here, so that's good. That's why we have Tim and John joining us today as the experts. All right, the next question. So poll number 2, if you're not using Pulsar or Nifi, what are other open source messaging or streaming technologies that you're using? We have a bunch of options here. So ActiveMQ, Spark, Flink, Kafka, RabbitMQ, Apache RocketMQ. Maybe if you don't find the ones that you're using right now, please feel free to use the chat function to let us know. Oh, I guess, sorry about that. I totally did not launch that poll yet, so totally on me. I was just giving everybody a heads up on what the poll was going to be. So I'll give everybody a couple seconds or so to let us know what streaming or messaging technology you're using. Okay, great. Let me go and end that poll and share the results since we have about 2 more. Perfect. So it sounds like a lot of people here are using Kafka, either Kafka, Spark, or MQ. Cool. All right, we'll go on to the third poll. What are your streaming use cases? So we have a bunch of use cases here: application monitoring, backend analytics, data warehouse, IoT, machine learning, financial data. We'd love to know what use cases you're using for streaming. And again, for those just joining us right now, we'll be starting in a couple minutes or so. We're just waiting for people to filter in. While we wait, we're just launching a poll to better understand you and your experience. Feel free to also use the chat function to let us know where you're calling in from and what beer you like, or drink of choice. I know everyone's not a drinker, so. Okay, great. We have a lot of responses coming in. So let me end this poll since I know we have one more question. Okay, great. So it looks like a lot of the streaming use cases kind of varies all around. I think the top one here is for building core business applications. That's interesting to hear. All right, down to the last poll. What all you guys have been waiting for. Last one, are you interested in the following services? So are you interested in Cloudera data platform, a Pulsar managed solution, maybe interested in both? And then maybe you'll probably want to learn more. Maybe you don't have the answer now, but that's totally fine. Okay, great. I think we've got enough time for the poll and for people to sign in. So let me just end that poll and then share the results. So great. A lot of people are interested in both. So that's perfect. I mean, you have both experts here from Cloudera and from StreamNative. So you're in the right place. All right, so we've given enough time for people to sign in. So we will start the virtual meetup now. Again, good afternoon and good evening to everyone, and welcome to the virtual meetup, Apache Pulsar and Apache Nifi for Cloud Data Lake. We are so excited to have you here joining us virtually. Before we start, just a couple of housekeeping items before we start. Please make sure to utilize the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen to submit any questions you have throughout the event. We'll try our best to answer them as they come in. Feel free to also use the chat function for any comments you may have and want to share with everyone. The event is also being recorded and will be made available to everyone by next week. All right, I'd like to now turn it over to Tim.
Well, thank you. And thanks again for everyone who's here. And a big thanks to Alicia for hosting, getting us going. She's been putting in extraordinary effort to make it look like we know what we're doing here. So we're going to cover Apache Pulsar and Apache Nifi today. If you've been on Twitter or LinkedIn, you'll see there's a bunch of articles describing the new release there. It's for more than just cloud data lakes, but it's nice to try to narrow it down a little bit. We've got a very unique use case we have today that we're playing around with in the demo, but you'll see the technology itself doesn't really need any one particular use case. It could be any data you have, all data, even everything in the world from logs to NFTs to whatever it may be. Our agenda today is pretty straightforward. We're going to try not to kill you with slides today. Hopefully we can keep to it. I'm going to cover a little bit around what exactly is Apache Pulsar and a couple of the features that I really like. John's going to cover Nifi, which is awesome. He's been doing some pretty interesting stuff on that side. We'll both show demos and they're connected together through the cloud and it really works. So that's pretty cool. Then we'll describe the key takeaways you should get from today, cover some resources, and then we'll do Q&A. And please feel free to connect with us. That's usually the most fun of the in-person meetups, which hopefully we'll be doing pretty soon in New York, New Jersey, Philly, San Francisco, and other parts of the world. I'm trying to arrange one in Spain because I'm going to be there in May for KubeCon and Spring I/O, but we'll see what happens. This is me. I've worked a couple places. You'll see that Cloudera one on there. So I might know a little bit about John and Nifi. Before that, it was Hortonworks, Pivotal, a bunch of different streaming tech. I love the putting them together. I'm calling it the flipping stack. Pulsar, Flink, and Nifi work really well together. We don't have time to show Flink today. We'll probably arrange that in the future and show some interesting things you could do with Flink. Hand it off to John for his introduction.
Yeah, so John Kuchmeck. I've been at Cloudera for about 3 years. I'm a principal solutions engineer. And before here, I actually worked at American Water, where I met Tim. So Tim was working at Hortonworks, and we would do a lot of OT/IT integration. So I was pulling data off PLCs, sensors real time, as well as ERP. So, doing incremental batching. There's a lot of things that you can do with Nifi. Basically, Nifi became the backbone of American Water's, essentially their flows, right? So, the data engineering pipelines. So I'm also was a Cloudera streaming SME. I help a lot of customers with streaming technologies across the board. And you'll see there, I have a lot of experience with Nifi in particular. So that's why I'm here.
Very cool. He is the only person who could really say they're streaming and it's water and it's data. It's like the perfect place for all those water analogies because there's water.
Yeah, the water drop just made sense for the logo of Nifi for us. So
yeah, I was like, Niagara Files. They're like, yes, there's a water tie-in. You sold it. You don't have to do anything else, which was great. So Pulsar. What's cool about Pulsar, cloud native. So it's designed from the start to run in modern platforms. It does messaging and event streaming, and we'll see what we mean by both. They are not the same. There is a problem we have is that we support a lot of different paradigms, and they sometimes use the same term for different things. Sometimes people exchange lots of different terminology, and I'll trip on that because 20 years ago we were doing different kinds of messaging. Is a message an event? Is that a message the same as a record? I mean, it gets a little crazy. So one platform to do everything, and we'll show you how you could do that. We better make sure you get your messages. I mean, this isn't the Canadian Post system. You send something, you're going to get it. Resiliency, as expected today. I don't want to ever have things go down. I want to be able to survive, major parts of the internet going down, and lots of different resiliency built in. And, one day your company can go from the, few million records a second you have. So one day you might be like 10 cents. You might have billions and billions of messages. Nice thing, you don't have to worry about it. We scale out as big as you need to go. And without any heavy lifting there, without reshuffling, without rebalancing the data, without pulling teeth. Pretty nice there. So what's the message? Trying to bring it down to, we call it a message. Now, in some paradigms, you might think of it as a message. You might think of it as an event. You might think of something else. But we'll call it a message, so we're all on the same page here. Now, the message has a couple different things in it. It has a value. What's nice with Pulsar is if you don't care of having other people look at it, you want to put some encrypted binary thing in there, sure. The messages can be any kind of raw bytes, whatever data payload you want, but it could also be Avro or JSON or protobuf or something else. What's nice is if you keep it to a consistent record style data and it has something that has a schema, it makes it very easy to operate on those type of records and do additional types of data processing on there because you know what it is. And we enforce data schemas by having our own schema registry as part of Pulsar, which you don't have to install anything additional, doesn't sit outside. It's just part of the system there, very helpful. As expected, sometimes you're going to need a key. We'll use that sometimes in partitioning, topic compaction, identifying your things, looking for dedupes, lots of different reasons why keys are helpful. Always set them. You could do it in a lot of different places, whether it's in Nifi, it's in a Python app, it's in a Java app, it's in a Go app, it's in a Node.js app. Set your key. You can add additional properties. These are helpful when you want to put your own metadata there, or maybe links to your own schema system or any other data you might need there without having to change the payload. It's nice to put a name on there. It's good for monitoring. It's also good for deduping to see, okay, these all came from the same producer. That is a dupe. Sequence ID, so we have an order for the things coming through the topic. Again, helpful, make sure we don't have dupes. A lot of people don't like dupes. For some types of messaging, it's okay, and we support that. Now, having a messaging system is nice, but getting data in and out of it, kind of important. So connectivity is kind of a big deal with Pulsar. A lot of different libraries. So if you need to write an app to consume or produce messages, we support all the major languages in there, and there's more underway. Those are all really solid. I tend to stick with Java and Python most of the time. I've tried Go, and it's ridiculously fast. And I'll show you a demo of using WebSockets. Makes it nice. You don't even have to think of it as a messaging system. I make a WebSocket call to produce data, and I just subscribe to WebSockets, and I get a stream of events coming at me as fast as you want into your front end. For mine, I'm putting that in a single page web app. Functions are cool. They do not replace Spark or Flink. These are designed for microservice things you might do with like a database trigger, something lightweight. You're doing something like maybe doing some sentiment analysis, some enrichment, some routing, lots of machine learning, nice things in there. Right now we support Java, Python, and Go. More languages can be added. Connectors, sources, and syncs, like you think they are, automatically ingest and send out data from Pulsar topics. These are done through simple YAML configuration. There's a lot of them in there. In the newer versions, we support Kafka Connect in there. So you just add to that list. We support lots of different protocols. This is how we say unified messaging. So I could do AMQP like Rabbit. I could do Kafka protocol natively. I could do MQTT. That one comes in handy for having a lot of devices and not have to change your code. Just as it streams right into Pulsar. Support for all the major processing engines like Flink and Spark. And we also have built-in Pulsar Sql, which under the covers is Trino. So you could just go to a SQL prompt or a SQL tool and look at all the data and topics, or write say a Flink SQL app and have continuous ETL on these topics, join together topics, all those sort of fun things. And of course, NiFi, while you're here today, that just got released, is released in the Cloudera public cloud. And it is a great way to get data in and out of Pulsar. The two guys together was listed in an article, peanut butter and chocolate, like in a Reese's, which is my favorite, so that's nice. Offload your data. This comes in handy. This, again, like everything in Pulsar, is configurable and flexible. So there's a lot of different tiered storage options. You turn this on after a certain parameters hit, maybe size, maybe time of the messages, they just get offloaded into S3, but there's no loss to you. If you want to go back to the first message you ever had, even if it's 50 petabytes in, we've got clients in China in the hundreds of petabytes, doesn't matter. You can go back to tiered storage and just read those back. Obviously, they might be slightly slower than our normal data tier, but still, you don't have to worry about changing a query or trying to offload that from another system. Use your standard consumers or any of those processing engines. Very nice way to get that data. While we're here today, we have this bundle here. It's integrated really well. We'll show this in all the demos. Very easy to get data into and out of Pulsar using NiFi record mechanism or the non-record readers if you're doing things like having bytes or having, whatever kind of weird data you might put in there. Pulsar supports batching and breaking apart bigger records. That might be better in the non-record reader there. Oh, did I go into your stuff?
Yeah, but it's okay.
I don't want to do any NiFi stuff.
I think I'll handle the NiFi stuff, Tim.
Okay.
So NiFi and NiFi registry, and usually you couple them together. For those that have never used or never looked at NiFi, so Apache NiFi is a data flow tool that's GUI based. One of the things that I love about NiFi is that you don't necessarily need to know how to code, but as long as you have an engineering mindset, and I'll make a great point, is my daughter, she is 13 years old, and in October that we had the International Day of the Girl. And so I've been playing around and teaching her NiFi off to the side, right? Because I think it's a relatively easy way to kind of, understand how to piece things together from that engineering mindset. And so she did, right? So we had a Raspberry Pi, we put some sensors on and started playing around with it, and she built her own flow. And the cool thing is that she was actually able to present, and probably better than me, about how to use Apache NiFi, and she's 13, right? So being able to do democratization of data, it's not just for, the front end application development, but really being able to build the pipelines in the same way, I think is a great way to do it. And Apache NiFi Registry allows you to do version controls of your flows. So where I worked at American Water, there's 3 of us that were the main NiFi developers, and we did have a couple people as well that would come in and out. And you hate when you go in and someone made a change to the flow, and you're like, why is this not working? And the cool thing is with Registry, you're able to actually back that out and put the previous revision in. You're able to see who committed those changes. So nothing's really happening on the fly, and that's the great thing about it. Now, on the next slide, we're going to talk about, the way that NiFi, or why NiFi should really be used. And so I have a great story for this. You see all this cool stuff, right? There's over 350 connectors within NiFi out of the box. Chances are, if you need to connect to a system, you can with NiFi. It doesn't matter what it is. So you can connect to RDBMSs through JDBC, right? We have things called controller services, over 120 controller services as well, which are reusable components to use throughout multiple flows. But you can connect to file systems, you can connect to HTTP, you can connect to webhooks, right? All of these things are relatively easy to do. Well, I was in a meeting, and when COVID kind of hit the first time, we started to build an internal kind of like demo or dashboard to get an idea of where COVID was, whether it was safe to travel. And so our HR came to us, right, from Cloudera and said, hey, we need you guys to build this app for us. So there was a group of us, and I was very fortunate to get to work on some of the stuff. And, there's another guy, Sunil, Paul, there's a bunch of guys. So I had a very small part, but still I was building some of the NiFi stuff, and we're pulling in data, and we're in the meeting with the head of HR. And he said, it would be great if I could find out the vaccine information for those areas as well. So I would, of course, taking the initiative, I'm like, okay, I can figure this out. So I quickly do a research, and I find there's APIs that exist to pull out all the vaccine information. I'm pretty good with Jolt, so the data was a little janky. What I ended up doing was, I threw everything together in NiFi, and in 30 minutes, I'm not even kidding, in 30 minutes, the meeting, by the time the meeting was over, I actually said, hey, by the way, all the vaccine information is now in Hadoop. We can start building dashboards on top of it. So, if you were to go say, hey, I want to get this information, and you had to hand stitch code and do all these different things, you're not doing that in 30 minutes. And it's the main reason why we were sold when I was a customer on Apache NiFi, is that things that would take me weeks to build pipelines, to find out, do inspection of data, all of that, it took a lot longer time. I couldn't actually build a prototype relatively quick and then, fine tune it. Being able to acquire from all different types of sources was huge for us. We first started, I think our very first, when I was at American Water, our very first thing was trying to do incremental batch out of SAP HANA. There was no real, Tunity didn't really have a connection there. There was no way to do CDC, and nightly batch mechanisms weren't working. We had problems in which, if say someone had water shut off, that they made a payment, but the data was 24 hours stale. So, our applications, when we're sending field service representatives out there, we're always lagging a little bit. So it would be great if we had applications that were more real time. And so that was the first thing we did, and it was successful. We were able to do it, presented at DataWorks Summit on it. And then we started looking at other things. So our raw water intake facility, could I pull the data in? So I started pulling data in from the PLC itself, right? So OPC UA connections. And then I started actually saying, hey, why don't we do this in a Lambda architecture? And I start pulling in from the historian, right? And I see, how do they match? Then we were like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we deployed this on iPads and put it on trucks? And so we did like a small little pilot in which we actually put Nifi on iPads and people drove around and you were able to see. So we could basically help route trucks better, right? If we knew that there was weather. So we started pulling weather information in and traffic information in. So Nifi really became the linchpin for all of the data that was ingested into our big data ecosystem. And it's only because it was so easy to just drag and drop connectors, stop a flow midway because something went wrong, and then actually fix it and then start it back again. I mean, if you're launching any other pipeline, you're stopping the flow. That's it. You stop the flow. Any data that's coming in at that time, you're not waiting, right? The other thing too is that Nifi has, the capability to do back pressure and throttling. That's hugely important when you're streaming in real-time data, because there's probably times where you're getting a flood of data and you want to make sure that the upstream processes don't actually get flooded as well. And so you can actually set at individual levels the throttling and back pressure. You could do it based upon how many records there are, or you could do it based upon how much size, whatever the upstream process or essentially the target system requires for you to hold it to. Guaranteed delivery as well, right? So everything comes in, everything's there. I love the fact that there's also a full data provenance. So for those that get audited, right, and we had to be SOX compliant. So for those that get audited, they want to find out what's happening to the record at any point in time. So Nifi has in it a data provenance to replay events. You can actually take a look and see all of the events that come in. It's a configurable parameter, but being able to see all the stages of the flow and what happened to the flow, I think all of that is, it saved us a couple times, right? I didn't have to actually, try to figure things out when I was audited, and PwC came in and they started asking questions. It's also easy to build your own stuff. I've built custom processors, and Tim will tell you, I'm really bad at Python, and I'm actually way worse at Java. So I actually have built my own processors. They're written in Java. So if you understand Java, writing a processor is not difficult. But then even if you don't want to go into the components of writing your own processor, you can actually write, there's scripted transforms, there's, execute scripts. So you can build something that's more comfortable language for you and then go ahead and run it that way. We do, however, caution that you should probably use whatever you can out of the box. If Nifi has something, like a lot of times we see where people go wrong is that they go, I have Nifi, I want to make sure that I need to do this thing, and I'm not really sure how to do it, so I'm going to write this Python script and run it through that. Well, chances are there might be one or two processors you can use instead of that, and when you do, it's going to be much more performant. It's also going to be much more resilient for upgrades. If you decide to leave the company, then that knowledge doesn't go with you. So we do say you want to use things out of the box if you can. And on the next page, we kind of talk about those capabilities in the different processors and also the data transformation. So if you look here, we're going to add essentially that Pulsar logo there soon too, but all the different types of data you can ingest, all the different transformations. So Nifi is not really an ETL tool with a capital T. We actually kind of caution it and say it's a lowercase t, or really it's an ELT tool, in the sense that you're not going to do merges in time. I mean, you could probably do some that are smaller, but that's not really its wheelhouse. Its wheelhouse is to get data from point A to point B, and then do conversions on that data if you want, adding maybe a record or a column, right? Because you want to add a timestamp component of the time of ingest or the time that you did something. All of those things, easy to do in Nifi. There's update record processors to do so. But you definitely don't want to think about using Nifi in a case where, like, hey, I'm going to replace like something where I'm merging 3 tables together. That's not really what Nifi will do. Nifi will trigger kind of the downstream systems to merge the data together and then pull it in. That's definitely something Nifi can do. And that's definitely something I've used Nifi for, but you don't really want to use it for that. And the same thing with being able to push the data, essentially to any target. Like, we interact with S3, we interact with Azure Data Lake, right? ADLS Gen 2. We interact with file systems. You essentially can push the data anywhere you want. And that's the beauty of Nifi. The other thing too is it's got a very rich and robust community. So if there's questions, you can usually search things. I will have to caution you though, I'm a huge proponent of Mark Payne put out these anti-pattern videos. And Mark Payne is an engineer. He's been working on Nifi for years, knows a lot more than I do. But essentially, he takes a look at, customers in particular and how their Nifi flows are. And you'll notice that there's specific anti-patterns. And a lot of times when you go search for how to do things, you're looking at the way that it used to be before record-based processors really exist. So I'm going to say, whenever in doubt, use a record-based processor, right? If you can use it. And then it's a lot easier than trying to do manipulation, say, in attributes and things like that. And on the next page. So I do want to touch on Nifi registry just a little bit as well. And this is actually called the flow development lifecycle. So Nifi registry allows you to go ahead and promote flows from one environment to another, and you can use the CLI to do so. So you can use Jenkins or whatever you use for your CI/CD processing. Nifi allows you to do that. There's also persistence providers, so you can use those in the back end, but we do recommend that you use the registry if you can across, say, the different domains that you're using, right? Or the different landscapes. So you see here dev, QA, and prod. You're using one registry. And the reason for that is that essentially it keeps track of all of the things, and it'll keep track of those versions as well. Each Nifi environment, essentially processors all have a unique ID, and those unique IDs across the processors are not actually going to match. And so what the registry does is it kind of keeps track of, this one to that one and does like that mapping so that when you go ahead and do the push down, it knows this flows in this bucket at this version, and now I've upped the version and the differences of the version, so you're good to go. I think that's definitely something that you look into. I was very happy when the registry came out because having to constantly copy what we used to do back in the day is copy the flow.xml.gz and put it in the GitHub and then constantly do that and then push it. For those that don't know, like Nifi has this thing called a flow.xml.gz file, which essentially is the entire Nifi environment. So essentially you're doing snapshots or backups of the environment. So that way, essentially you can actually move that if you needed to for the different versions or replay events. So I think, Tim, that's it for me. And I think we're about to go into your stuff a little bit, right? And then we'll get into some
we're almost
demo.
in demo land, which is a happy place to be.
Yeah, demo land's my favorite land. I don't like slide lands. I like demo land.
I like bacon land too, but yeah, demo land is nice. The one thing I'll say, having used Apache Nifi for 6 years or so, it hasn't crashed on me in a public environment. And I've done maybe 150 live events. And sometimes it's running on a laptop. Sometimes it's running on a NVIDIA Jetson or on a Raspberry Pi or on a janky used server that I bought for $300 or in the worst provisioned OpenStack environment one could imagine. If you got enough RAM, Nifi just runs. You beat it up, it just keeps going. It's NSA grade, which is hard to find nowadays. I put together all my friends into one stack, and my weekly thing covers Flink, Pulsar, Nifi, Spark, and a bunch of other open source goodies out there. So check that out. And let's get to the demo. We'll show you how the super friends work together here. I'll start it off because I start the data reading from Nifi. Today's data is a little interesting. We are doing NFTs that we pulled out of OpenSea. This is my NFT collection. I will make so much money that I will no longer be doing technology very soon. But, here we go. So the data in OpenSea is a lot of data because everybody in the world seems to have a collection on OpenSea. And when you do NFTs, you tend to make 10,000 at a time. I have 4 because I haven't built a bot in NiFi yet to make these, which I could probably do, which is the power of NiFi. I have one that did an automatic jukebox, so you can do anything in there. So we're going to grab data from here. OpenSea has a open REST API. REST APIs in NiFi are a very happy place to be. Oh, thought I lost my connection there. I'm logged into my own NiFi running on NVIDIA Xavier. I've pulled in some data here from REST endpoint. I'm going to take a look at this. The nice feature of NiFi here is I could pause data at any time and then take a look at it. And as he mentioned before, that provenance, we could see that as the records that have come through here already. And what's cool with this is I could export that to some other system like Pulsar and then use it for whatever. But what's cool is if you're trying to figure out what happened before or while you're building or trying to debug things, you get exact timestamp, you get a unique ID, you get file size, you get what happened before, what happened after, and a ton of metadata that you put in there yourself and others that just came from the system. Like I made a REST call, so I'm going to get some information from REST, like some headers and some other metadata that could be useful. Like here's the URL that I'm looking at to let me get 50 records at a time in JSON. And I've gone through 1,000 of those 50 record chunks, a lot of data. And I can compare, see what changed in it, all those sort of fun things. I have this paused here. This is a configurable queue. This is where that back pressure happens. This is where if you want to do load balancing. This also lets me run once. Like if I'm not sure if I fixed my code here, maybe I'll run once to see if it worked. And it did work. Here is those record readers he was talking about. They're very fast, highly recommend them. I've got one for JSON and JSON out. Where are NiFi events stored? We can go at the end. It's a configurable. We didn't do the full NiFi tour where we show all the repositories within NiFi where they're stored. And if you're running in Kubernetes, they're stored outside of the pods, but they're usually stored in files. You can pick in memory if you wanted to, but probably with the amount of data you push through NiFi, files are faster. Anyone coming from the world of Kafka and Pulsar knows disk for storage of things is not a bad thing. It's still pretty fast. So with NiFi, I could use Apache Calcite to query any data. Here I'm filtering out the poop because we don't want any poop data. And mean that figuratively and literally. There's a lot of junk in that in those NFT feeds, and hopefully we filter it out. I know John does some filtering later. I just noticed some fields in there that I could have used to filter it further, but I didn't notice that till later. Now I'm pushing data to 2 different places. I could have Pulsar geo-replicate for me automatically, but I didn't want to do that. I could have had it, I could have had that happen after. You see in NiFi, it's very easy to send data to multiple locations, or you could chain things. Like here, this one's pushing to StreamNative's cloud. If we look inside the Pulsar processor, I'm using the record one. If we take a look inside here and grab the processor, I do a search on Pulsar. You see I've run a couple different versions here, and they're all available. 1.15.2 is the latest. We'll probably wait till 1.15.4 to put out another update on this, but unless someone finds a bug. See, we could use the one that doesn't take records. This is if I want to put bytes in there. Again, if that's what your data looks like, use that one. If your data looks like data, like here, it's JSON. So I'm going to use records. It's a lot faster. No reason not to. Here I got JSON in. I've got JSON coming out. Again, if I wanted to put it in another format, I could choose to do that. You know, you might want it in Avro is a good format for Pulsar. Jason's pretty good. You could do protobuf. I tend to like Json. You'll notice something unique with the topic names here. They might look a little different from what you're used to from our Kafka friends. The first thing it tells you is persistent. That is because we could have non-persistent ones. Again, something a little different from Kafka, because sometimes you don't need to store those messages. Like if I have something that's giving me a flag or an alert every 10,000 times a second, it just says okay, okay, okay. Sometimes I don't care about every okay. I just care about a not okay, or when something changes. So I might not want every message. I might not need every message. I might not need those stored, because if it's a minute old data, it's garbage to me. So persistent, non-persistent. After that, we've got a tenant. We didn't mention before Pulsar is multi-tenant. So I can have one cluster or one instance that contains many clusters with one set of different tenants in it. So I could have 50 businesses or 50 business units all under their own tenant. And under there, they each can have a namespace. And under there, I can put all my topics. So you can see how you could support millions of topics, because it doesn't make you make all these kind of weird naming conventions, because you've got all these different tenants and namespaces to work with. Pretty nice there. If I wanted to send to multiple topics, I could do that. Same coming the other way. If I'm consuming, I could consume from multiple topics, those sort of things. I could send things asynchronously, and that's a batching mode if I want, or I just send them as it happens and wait. Lots of things you can configure based on, if you've seen the Pulsar client producer, there's a lot of options there. So you can make those decisions how you want to do that. The default settings for most people are probably okay. When you have to make decisions later how you want to do that, you could tweak that, and we'll have some best practices there for you. I put a message key in here because I told you have a key. So when we look at the data, we'll know what's going on. Nice to know. Here, one of the nice features of NiFi is I can grab any attribute with these special tags. We said there's no coding, and there isn't unless you want to. You're still in this graphic environment, but have access to the docs from anywhere. Nice feature in NiFi. I can go to expression language. This built-in language, kind of like Spell and Spring, lets me do a lot of configuration, if statements, encoding. There's a lot of goodies you can do in there to build up some basic stuff. It's nice. So we've sent it to Pulsar, and I know that because there's no failure here, and the results go somewhere. Now, you don't terminate your flows until you decide you want to. I mean, you can just keep going. You could have, success here, failure here. There could be multiple states. And here I've got this data, and I'm just going to store it in a file and then be done with it. That's up to you. So we've got the data. Just want to make sure that it arrived. I've got a consumer here. Sometimes you don't want to write an app or, use something. We could just use a simple command line tool to receive these messages. Makes it very easy. So this guy's just waiting for messages to come. So if I get any more messages, let me just trigger a couple more. I've got a little loop up there, and it's just going to give me a couple more messages, and then we'll see them show up down here as they come in, just so you get an idea what's going on. There you could see that key we set. There's the record. You can see it's JSON, and it's got all those fields we were looking at, just to show you how that works. And this is our topic. A lot going on in there. Unless you time out. Again, for security, you probably want things not to last forever. I pick my tenant, pick my namespace, go to all my topics, find my topic, and it's pretty straightforward there. I should have probably showed it to you where we're actually pulling it from. I'm sending this to 2 clusters just because I can. And what's another thing? Before I send it over to change the share with John, I want to show you my own little display here. This is a single page web app that's doing a WebSocket call to Pulsar. I don't need any other server. I don't need to cache the data anywhere. This web page is acting as a consumer of the data. And this is just a very simple data table to show that data as it's coming in and format it, you know, whatever way we want to format it. There is a lot of records here, and my table can only show 1,000, but, you know, that's a pretty good list of data here. And there's a lot of different NFTs going through. Let me see if I'm in the right environment. Let's go over to our shared environment we have here. We're doing this through the cloud because I'm sitting over here in Princeton and John is very far away somewhere else. So we'll share data over the cloud. Use StreamNative Cloud is a great way to do Pulsar. So I don't have to do all the, you know, very hard work of installing it. And you can see here what the schema looks like with all those fields there. And if we wanted to, we could take a look at some of the messages just to see, okay, data's coming through here. We've had a lot of messages come through. Pretty good time to hand it over to John. Do you need any more new messages over there?
Yeah, if you could send me some, that'd be great. I don't
How
think.
many? Do you want 4,000 or you want like 3?
4,000 is fine.
Okay.
I think I can handle 4, it. We're going to find out.
That's a lot of data.
Cluster. Yeah,
okay, let me stop sharing so you could share. Let's see. Did they get over there? Oh, there's a couple hundred.
All right. So
getting them.
Yeah. So you'll see here that I have now data flowing in these success queues. And what I have here, and let me make this a little bit bigger. Can you guys see my screen better?
Yeah, that's looking good.
All right. So, you know, this is a very simple flow. I'm not doing much to this flow, but I'm consuming the data and I'm using a record-based processor. Now, as Tim said, if you look at the configuration, I have a tree reader and a record set writer. And of course, I have this Pulsar client service. The first thing that I'm going to do is back up. And I'm going to show you that I have everything located in what's called a process group. So this process group is a way for you to kind of combine your entire flow and put it into one area. If you decide that you want to, you know, kind of secure your cluster in such a way that you have a multi-tenant environment of people working on it, you actually can secure it at this process group level. It's hugely important because, you know, we work with rather large clients that decide that group A can't see what group B is supposed to be doing. And so you want to make sure that that's 100% possible. So there's ways to either make it so that they can't read, essentially can't see what they're working on at all. They can't write and they can't execute, right? So you have that level of granularity. You'll also notice that I have this little asterisk. So I made a small change, right? Because I wanted to show what this was. And this all has to do with the Nifi registry. So if you come here and look at the Nifi registry, I only had one version that was available, and you'll see that I committed this version 2 days ago, right? So I set everything up, I built my flow, and I said, hey, I'm good to go, I'm gonna commit the version. And then I came in and I was like, you know what? I wanna change the parameter context because I'm using something called a parameter context, and we'll get into that in 1 second. But I wanna change it in the flow and just actually you know, put the value in that I want. And so the minute that I did that, I actually end up getting this little thing here, right? This little asterisk that's telling me, hey, local changes have been made. You want to commit them. If I come down and I say, hey, I'm going to commit these local changes. So I'm going to say that I, you know, removed parameter. Just put connection string, right? And consume Pulsar. So I go ahead and save, and you see here it goes to a green check. So that means that essentially I've committed that the flow version, and now I'm good to go. If I wanted to, I could change the version back to the first one. Not a problem. I'm terrible with commit messages. You should see my code. I never comment. I'm terrible. But if I wanted to go back to version 1, all I'd have to do is click on it and then hit the button change, but I'm not going to do that right now. Now, I talked about parameters. And so parameters are a way for you to kind of be able to put values within process groups. And the latest versions of Nifi actually have what's called parameter inheritance, which means that if you have, say, process groups that are underneath of a process group, right? Let's say you're in that multi-tenant environment with a bunch of different process groups, you'd be able to inherit the parameters that you have from the top level PG, right? Or top level process group. So you'll see here, I just have two of them, right? So I have my Kudu master set up, and then I have the topic. So I actually, where I want to pull it from in Pulsar. If I come in here, you'll see that when I do my put Kudu, if I look at the configuration, this is the way that you actually set that parameter. And so I also have the capability to hit that arrow, and that arrow will bring up my parameters right away. I'm not doing any inheritance at the moment, but you'll be able to see there is a way to do inheritance. And the other cool thing about parameters is if I wanted to add a new one and just say test, and I wanted to put in, say, John's secret key, right? I can set it as a sensitive value and apply. And so now you have no way of telling that this is John's secret key. It's sensitive value set, so it obfuscates it from the UI. This way, if you're sharing things with other people or you're allowing them to have read access to your flows, they don't actually see those keys that you wanted. And I think this was a great thing that they did. Previously variables were heavily used, but variables are going to go away. They're eventually going to be deprecated, right? Now, I update attribute and I do a Jolt transform. I'm going to show you a couple different flavors of Nifi as part of it, but Jolt is one of my favorite things to do. So I'm actually repositioning the schema. So when the data comes in, it's coming in a particular way. And I noticed that this ID ended up being kind of a unique characteristic. In Kudu, Apache Kudu is a OLAP engine. Essentially, you can run Impala queries on top of it. So you have SQL on top, but it's really the backend data store. And I'm doing upserts against Kudu. So I want to make sure that I don't really want to have duplicate records involved. So what I need is a key, right? So I set two primary keys. I have ID and I have this date. And you even notice here, I changed date to date list. And that's because date's a reserved word in Kudu, right? In Impala. So I can't use that word. So I'm actually shifting the way that the actual schema is, setting it the way that I want in Jolt, and then changing the topic, the key value, right? So I'm saying the key name here is dateless. I'm going to show you something else in Jolt where I take, kind of stuff from the API that Tim's pulling from and pull it in. You also notice here that I have these update attributes. So all these update attributes is essentially I have this thing called step. And if something were to fail and it were to have to push the record over, you would be able to log a message. So this is very typical of how you see a flow, right? I could actually take steps of failure, inject essentially something related to the attribute. And you'll see here in my log message, I actually use that same attribute right here called step. So no matter what, I essentially can get a log message to say there was a failure in this step. Now, when I was building these flows in production, we would send them to emails. So we would actually get emails. We've done it and Tim does it all the time with sending it to Slack if that becomes your platform, right? But for us, it was emails, and then SMTP, we would be able to take whatever our incident management stuff was and listen to it. And then you'd actually be able to automate incident creation, which is something that we also did as well. You can also take the failure down to like another file. So the cool thing is that just because it fails, you can route that failure to offload that data from the failure and be able to replay that event later and figure out why did it fail? Was there a schema mismatch in the data? Is something happening, right? And you can build a lot of that. And there's a lot of automation and design that you can build in Nifi as well. Now, once it's in Nifi, it goes into Kudu. And what I did here is I actually just did, so let me make this a little bit smaller so you can see, but I just created a table in Kudu. Now this is Hue, which is looking at an Impala table on top of Kudu. And I have all of this data, which is really cool. And so I was like, man, I want to build a dashboard, and dashboarding is really the way to look at it. But, a lot of the cool things associated with it is I noticed that there was an image URL. And so first I did some inspection, and it was really hard for me to tell from the image URL do all of these things match up, right? Because each of these image URLs are relatively long. So I could construct something to kind of do a group bys. And you'll even see my query history. You know, I do select distinct. I'm doing select certain things and grouping by and then ordering by to see how many duplicates they are. And one thing that I noticed is that these NFTs are being bought and sold by the same person over and over again. And another thing that I saw, and I'm going to show you in a second, which is really cool, is that the same picture with the same image URL has different IDs. So NFTs are supposed to be unique. There's only supposed to be one, and that's the value of them, right? It's a non-fungible token, can't break it. You're the only one who owns it. There's uniqueness, and that's essentially where this praise for value is. I don't know if that's true. Now, I'm not saying it's not, but at the same time, like from the things that I've seen so far, not 100% sure it's there. So I built my dashboard using Cloudera data visualization. And what's really cool is that you'll see here, I even got the animations. It was really easy, right? The cool thing about this tool is that I can come in and I can look at the data. And if I decide that I want to edit the fields, you'll see here that I changed. So this used to be called image URL, now just called image. I look at the display format and I have this custom, essentially JavaScript. Now this isn't the, you know, if I put in the image URL in here, you'll see, and it actually created, I basically created HTTP tags. I have a configuration that allows me to pull in HTTP and I get everything here. But, you know, to go back to my home screen, essentially without changing anything, and you'll see this went from 5 to 7 down here because we just uploaded a ton of pictures. If I click on this image, I can actually go and look at the show the detailed data. So it's actually looking at the image URL and anything associated with this image URL, I'll be able to get an idea. And lo and behold, I have an idea of 110 million, 141 million, 208 million. And a lot of these are playing over and over again. And if you notice, the timestamps are different, right? And the contract owner is the same. So is this person just putting out the same NFT over and over again? I don't know, right? But there's things that we can do now because as we look in the data and you want to actually arm yourself and you're saying, hey, I'd be really interested in buying NFTs and brokering NFTs, you kind of have an end-to-end solution. Now, to go back to Nifi for a minute, I'm going to come over here. Now, this is Nifi in our public cloud. So there's two flavors of Nifi that exist within the public cloud. There's what we call a data hub, which is very similar to clustering. And you'll see here, I've got 3 nodes. I have 2 different ways to look at something. So, you know, I have to fix this Jolt. I'm not going to lie. I was telling Tim, it does certain things really well, but I just have to bring everything down. But this is a way for me to kind of combine some of the data and flatten it out. And then out of the box, we also have this flattened Json processor, which is really cool. So I'm just going to trigger this with a run once event. And you're going to see that data comes in. So if I look at the list queue and I hit this information, you'll see that the view and the details here, and this is going to take a minute because it's seriously, it's like 1 point some megs. So don't get discouraged. There you go. So I can click on this and formatted option. What it's going to do is actually going to show me the formatted JSON. And you'll see here that maker.user.username, that's because I used the dot notation and it actually started to flatten it out. Now, it couldn't flatten out assets and it couldn't flatten out ID, right? So these are all different things that exist. And you'll even see some of the sales contracts. So there was initial data that was coming from Pulsar that I was like, hey, this is really good. And then I started going, hey, what if I wanted to pull other information in? Like, so there's a whole array associated with sales down here somewhere. So like, what if I wanted to pull the sales data in and get more ideas with the sales data? So at the exact same time that flow came through this way, it also sent to a Jolt Transform. And you'll notice the data size is slightly different because I do things a little bit different in this, right? I'm not using a dot notation. I'm basically maintaining the same key, especially if I know that there's no key duplicates within the same array. Now, again, still close to a meg though, so it's going to take a minute. Once it loads up, I'll be able to look at this formatted, and you'll see here that it's a lot flatter, right? But now I have these array structures inside of my username. So if I wanted to bring everything in as say one record, I'd be able to do it. but I'd be able to take a look at the different aspects within the data and kind of flatten out that record associated with it. The other thing that you notice, though, is that with NiFi, I was able to route the data to 2 different places at once. That's the cool thing about it. So say, for instance, that I decide that I need to do something with the data set, but I want to maintain the local copy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to push the data down one way, have the data in another. You can do multiple routings all at once, which is fantastic. Now, the other cool thing that we have is called DFX. So it's NiFi that's running on Kubernetes in the cloud native. This is Cloudera data flow. You'll see here that I actually have different flows that exist. We have something called a catalog. So you can very easily develop your flow in, in NiFi. Once it's developed, you can download the JSON template, right? So there's a JSON definition file. You download that. And then through the CLI, you can upload it. Matter of fact, I wrote like a shell script when I had for a previous client where I'm basically going in, grabbing the latest flow, the newest flow, you pull it, you look at the registry, look at the version, pull it down, and then upload it to the CLI, all like that. So pretty fantastic. NiFi can pretty much do anything. And that's what I love about it. So Kubernetes, you have just the clustered option, which you see a lot of people using in production. And we didn't even go into NiFi stateless. So stateless is a way for you to run a NiFi flow, essentially without any UI at all. And I see this a lot when people want to maintain FIFO and they don't want to do it within a clustered environment and they don't want to stand up a single node. And so what they're doing is they're actually taking in records in real time. They're running it stateless and then pushing it down to where it needs. Now, stateless, obviously, some of the merge options and things like that exist are not quite there. But stateless is definitely a pretty cool aspect of NiFi. And it's been around for a little bit, but I think it's getting a little bit more juice. Now, I do want to show you controller services. So let me go back to the NiFi flow here. If I go ahead and click this configure, so this is the root canvas, you have this thing called controller services. Now, you'll notice that in the controller services, you have something called a scope. So your scope is essentially where your controller service can be utilized. If you see it say NiFi flow, that means it could be used anywhere within the root canvas and down, any processor groups. It doesn't matter. But if I were to create, say, let's go back in here, and let's say I want to create a controller service here, I'm going to do a database connection, right? Now, I'm not adding anything to it. You'll see here, look at the scope right away. It's get NFTs from Pulsar. I can't use this anywhere else. So again, when we talk about being able to separate out tenants and you don't want them to have access to certain things, if you create everything within that scope, no one can touch it unless they have access to that process group. If you create it on the root canvas, like say there's things that you definitely want shared and you don't want to have to, constantly make new ones, you can have these master controller services. And we used to do it all the time. Now, NiFi also has within it its own schema registry. So I'm going to do this because it's going to take me to now you'll see I'm at the root level and you can't see that database connection pool at all, right? It went away. But some of the settings associated with it, you'll see that you can actually out of the box have an Avro schema, which I'm utilizing for my put kudu, or, there's other things like the Cloudera schema registry, but that's pretty much it. From a NiFi perspective, I thought it was pretty cool. I think that's the biggest thing. Like when I was telling Tim, like, as you start to look at some of these pictures and drill down, you start to realize like, maybe there's not uniqueness in some of these NFTs and I definitely saw that they were being bought and sold kind of by the same person, or at least it appeared that way, right? At least from those IDs. So something to be aware of. I think it's pretty cool. I'd like to dig in a little bit further. Obviously, this is very tertiary, so don't take my word as bond. I don't want to say that this is definitely the case. It's just some initial inspection, but being able to stream that data in real time and create a great visual off it kind of gave me that idea that this might be it. So you'll definitely hear more from me in a little bit about whether this is the case or not. And again, this is all because Pulsar is getting that data in real time, creating that message bus for the downstream application, NiFi streaming it in to put it into the source system database that you want to, or sorry, the target database that you want to, and then being able to build cool apps on top of it. So you really do get an end-to-end NFT application. So I'm going to stop sharing. So what'd you think, Tim? That wasn't bad, right?
Very cool. I never have any complaints about NiFi ever. So
no.
it just works. And there's the thing that makes it difficult, especially when you do it with Pulsar, is you have a lot of options. And options make it sometimes hard to know how should I do a thing. So I mean, best practices, I mean, the videos that Mark put out.
Yeah.
Those are pretty awesome. We have our Mark is David, and he puts out some amazing ones. So does Addison. So does Mateo. I mean, on our YouTube channel, we have those same kind of things where someone who's deep into the code goes, hey, look at this. Like David wrote this processor a number of years ago. And when I came over from joined StreamNative, I'm like, we need full NiFi support because I love NiFi, and I'm like, it is so easy for me to get data into and out of things with it. We need to make sure this supports everything, is in the latest version, and gets the blessing of Pierre and the team over at Cloudera to make sure that if people want to use it, they could do it. They're probably not going to be loading NFTs to put into their Kudu data lake, but you never know. They might want to pull in REST data, which is the same thing. Get it through NiFi, get into Pulsar. Maybe it comes out to NiFi again. Maybe it comes out to Spark, or comes out to a web app, or like here in my little chat app, it just comes in and out through WebSockets. There's lots of data coming in and out when you're doing this, and having the two open source projects here work together really gives you a lot of flexibility to write apps, like you said, half hour, maybe sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes a little longer when you start tweaking things or try to optimize things or try to get clever. And you're like, oh, I want this extra data. Or like, oh, what if we combined it with weather data? Oh, and this other data. It's really nice. And then once you get them into those streams, on the other end, we could do something like Flink SQL and join them together, or Spark.
Yeah.
So many different things.
Yeah, I'd say I spent like a total of an hour on this, maybe.
Nice.
And I sat down one morning and just kind of hashed it out real quick. Like I said, I want to make it a little bit more robust. Like I want to take a look at some of the sale data and try to bring that in. Might even separate it out into two different like streams, essentially split the JSON content to have the asset data and the sale data, because they're two different arrays I've noticed within, the NFT data. But I don't think this is the last you'll hear of me and Tim building kind of this NFT thing, but I'm interested to see where it goes. But I mean, that's the cool thing, right? In an hour, I now can inspect, and now I have an idea. I have a hypothesis. And if I'm running a brokerage firm, that's where you start, right? And then you go, or maybe I'm
real-time ingest and data manipulation.
That's it. Maybe I'm interested in buying NFTs. Does it make sense? You start looking them up and you go, oh, I've noticed that this has the same picture is there for this ID and that ID. Maybe that's one I don't buy. There you go. Yeah, looking forward to more NFT flows.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you could do there. And again, the key takeaway is easy to use and configure. Just right click and start diving in. Being able to code while data's coming in live and decide, oh, let me move it here. Let me run one at a time. Okay, let me change something. Let me send it to Pulsar and write to Kudu into a file and to wherever.
Yeah.
Really nice. Many ways to connect data in and out. Pulsar and NiFi, Kafka Spark, Flink. Like I said, there's lots of different pieces in the open source, and this just makes it two guys who like to talk to each other a lot, makes it very easy to do these kind of apps. It's just lots of integration. There's we released a whole bunch of information on this now. There's some new stuff out. We've got a blog out. I've got a GitHub that I'm trying to accumulate all the new stuff coming out with this. We've got a landing page here. There'll be a blog on Cloudera coming up. That's probably out in the next couple of weeks. There's some articles out there, and like Batman and Robin said, these things are cool. Let's both do them. Very nice stuff. I got a couple of friends in the chat. I thought I'd like to introduce my friend Doug, who I got to meet in person today, like it's the real world. Also another Jersey boy, which is awesome. Hey, Doug, are you around? You want to say hi?
I don't think he's able to say anything, Tim. Yeah.
Sorry, Doug.
Yeah,
but that's what he looks like.
Promoted to panelist.
Yeah. You could put something in the chat.
Yeah, he can be live on tape, and we'll turn his head into an NFT and then load him, and then it'll be just like the real thing, man. Which is pretty cool. What else we got here? We got all our contact info in there. Then we could, after this, we'll start looking through the questions. I know that there was some of them in there. We did answer some in the chat, and we have our ringer, David, in there, who literally wrote the book on Pulsar, and you could get that book for free. There's a link to that somewhere. Maybe someone posted that. Pretty awesome book. I was going to write a book on Nifi, but it's too easy. Don't need a book.
Actually, there might be another one coming out soon.
Oh, they're finally going to get that one.
Maybe.
Perfect. So I can drop that link in the chat for the book. Otherwise, again, thank you so much to Tim and John for that presentation and really awesome demo and findings. Again, as Tim mentioned, we'll be diving into some of the Q&A. Please make sure to use the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen as opposed to the chat so that it gets in front of us faster. We did have a couple of questions come in. And again, I know Tim and I think David, one of our other colleagues, probably answered some of the questions in the chat. But the first question that came in was, with the popularity of Kafka, what would be the motivation to use Pulsar and how is it different from Kafka?
Well, I'm not going to go into a battle royal. That's the great thing with Apache. Open source, we're all friends. There's lots of different reasons to use different systems out there. David listed a lot of some of the features that are a little different from Kafka that may come in handy for you. Different subscription modes, I think, is interesting. These are not possible with Kafka. So this gives you some different ways of consuming the data. Things like there's times when you may want anyone who can get that data to get it. Like you're doing a work queue, not something you can do with Kafka. I want to be able to process everything in the world at once. So I'll spin up 10,000 consumers and I don't want just one person getting them. I want as many things. I want a shared consumers, no order, just send me as much data because I need to execute things. That is a very nice feature unique to Pulsar. Having that built-in schema registry in there, very nice. Supporting all the major popular schema styles there. And it's so transparent, you don't even have to worry about it. When I do it in Python or Java apps, when I'm first producing something, I just build an object, send it along with my data, and now it's in the version control. Geo-replication is simple and set up for you. Very helpful to be able to do that really easy. Being able to do messages like you can in Rabbit or SQS, or do streaming like Kafka and Kinesis with the same messaging system. Pretty nice feature there. We mentioned a number of the cool things like scalability, because we have a different compute and storage layers are isolated. Having that multi-tenancy support with tenants and namespaces, supports for a ton of topics. You don't have to worry about rebalancing. None of that is a concern, which if you've used Kafka for a while, that is a term you've heard and seen and have done and have lived through and are probably happy that you don't have to do that anymore. That's probably enough there. I don't know if David has any more things he wants to put in there. He put a lot of good stuff in the chat. and we'll make sure that's in any notes. So if people are looking, also give it a try. Try it out. Go to Pulsar Apache org. You can download it as a Docker. Very easy to run. Single node will run for you very easily. Or come to our academy. We have free online training, and it's really solid. David has done a tremendous amount of work, and so is our training team to make this available. And you get access to a cluster when you're doing it, so you can learn by doing, and you don't have to, there's no heavy lifting there. There's no investment for you. Register, start doing it, and see if you like it. If you don't like it, complain to us on Slack, and we'll probably fix it in an hour if it's legit, or show you what you might be missing. I think that's probably enough on that one.
All right, great. Thanks, Tim. And then I also added the link to the Pulsar in Action free ebook if you want to download that. Great. So the next question is, where are the NiFi events stored? John, I think this is a question for you that came up during the presentation.
So there's 3 repositories that exist in NiFi, and actually, when you set them up in like a production setting, you want to make sure that they're each on their own disks. You don't want them to share because of the I/O that's occurring. There's a content repository, there's a flow file repository, and there's a data provenance repository. I will say this though, that the data is not necessarily stored on NiFi. So the data provenance repository will replay the events and what occurs to the flow when it exists. But the content and flow file repository, the minute the flow is done, that's it, right? So it only exists as long as the flow sits within the canvas. Now, if you have a processor where you stop it and the data is just backing up there, then it will still persist there, or you run it off to a funnel and say, don't do anything with it, right? You let it sit in a queue, then it's just gonna sit in that queue and it will still exist on disk at that time. But if you let it terminate, so if you terminate on success, terminate on failure, or send it down to like, say, a message or a file, and then terminate it on success to that, then that's it. And your data provenance repository is configurable. So out of the box, it's 12 hours, I believe. And then you can configure that parameter, and you can even offload it if you want. That's something that we used to do. So we would actually offload the data provenance repository. We would only have it configured for so many hours, but then we'd have, every event that could exist from that repository as well. So it's something you could definitely do.
Great, thank you so much, John. The next question is, I think this came up during Tim's presentation or during your demo. Is the Flow user interface based on an open source library, or was that built in-house?
Definitely open source. The Cloudera logo is the difference. It's a NiFi logo in the open source. If you notice, when you looked at Tim's, he had a NiFi logo on the top left-hand side. When you looked at mine, it had a Cloudera logo on the top left-hand side. So, but all of this is all open source. So the open source stuff has the UI ready to go. Obviously, there's some benefits of using, in my opinion, the Cloudera version, right? Including, additional security measures and integrations that are fully tested, right? So although there's testing that exists in the open source, I wouldn't say it's quite on par. And then of course, there's also, we could bring in specific processors into the fold, pretty quickly as well. So.
Great, awesome. Tim, did you want to add anything to that, or I can go to the next question?
Well, I was just showing the how the UI works.
The get. Yeah.
Everything behind the scenes is a REST call. That's really cool.
Yeah. So no, leave that up. Leave that up. So go to status or whatever, right? Where you do the run. Right click. No, in that bar, where it's that right click, and then copy. You should go to copy and then do curl command. So copy is curl. So you want to automate your flow? All you have to do is build the flow and do things with it. And then you essentially can, and this will tell the status, there it is. So everything's a curl command. So you can actually download, it's all REST calls, right? And you can actually download the curl command. So when you first are trying to automate flow development, that's the way you do it. And then you get better, right? You actually go look at the REST API, and you don't have to have all that extra stuff in it, but it's pretty pretty neat. And we actually have a guy here, Andre, who has he has automated everything, man. The guy's amazing. Yeah. And Dan Chafelson. Yeah. So Dan Chafelson created NiFi.
My old
NiFi
team,
API.
#1, man.
Yeah. And this is what I used to use to automate my flows when I was a customer. Like I said, I'm best at Python. Still terrible, but best at Python.
Great. To our next question here. When should I process with NiFi, Pulsar, Spark, or Flink? This is a question for both of you.
You want to go first? You want me to go first?
You do the NiFi, because NiFi should be first. To me, it's the Swiss Army knife. Try it first.
Well, so I would go across the stack, because for me, it's a matter of each one has a slightly different purpose, in my opinion. So I'm going to give my perspective. So Spark is micro batching. If you're doing Spark streaming, realize that it's not truly a real-time flow, right? It has to micro batch. It doesn't work in a real-time streaming context. If you have to do, say, machine learning, things like that on streaming data sets, and you're okay with, say, 30 millisecond latency, then that Spark streaming's okay. I think that's where it's pretty good. Spark naturally has some libraries, of course, that is really good for that. Flink is if you want real-time streaming joins of data where windowing is incredibly important. So windowed events, that's where Flink, that's its wheelhouse. I mean, no one really does windowing, in my opinion, as well as Flink does. Pub sub, so when you want a pub sub mechanism, right? Essentially, you want to be able to store data sets, and you want consumers to be able to consume the data set and producers to be able to produce data to it at the rate that they want. That's where you use something like Pulsar, because Pulsar is going to hold that data in. You can be able to write and read at the pace that you want to read and write from. Also low latency, very scalable. And you use NiFi when you need to just get data from point A to point B without doing a ton of transformation. I mean, obviously routing, it's hugely useful. So if you look at, there's I don't know if we could say this, right? So there's a tool that does log analytics stuff. I'm going to say it in that vague way. And a lot of times what ends up happening is that it costs per terabyte, right? Or whatever of data that comes in. And so the problem is there's no pre-filtering mechanism that you can use. We've saved customers like hundreds of thousands of dollars by putting NiFi in between that, because NiFi basically looks at the content of the data and routes the data based on content, and then go ahead and sends it to the log analytics tool. So you still, I mean, the log analytics tool does what it does. It's fantastic at what it does, but NiFi essentially just makes sure that only the stuff that you really care about analyzing is what gets in, not the flood of everything. So in my opinion, it's all that, right? NiFi is point A to point B, minimal transformation, very good at routing data, sending it one way or the other. Pulsar for that pub sub mechanism, where you want to store data for a specific amount of time as well. Spark, primarily the machine learning on the streaming side. In my opinion, I think Flink is definitely the best of breed for the joining of data, because you could do that in Spark too, and then Flink specifically when you're looking at Windows, right? Windowed events. Tim?
Yeah, to me, I try everything first in NiFi just to see if it's possible. Okay, I got data, it went somewhere. Then you start making the decisions. Is it ETL? Is it something I have to do continuously? Like I said, or is it windowing? Flink for those advanced use cases, or when I want to do continuous SQL. Spark SQL is good, like you mentioned, but it is always a micro batch. And coming from Pulsar, we could think in batch, but we usually like to work in the realm of real-time streaming, not batching in any way, getting those event at a time to somebody. So NiFi, getting it from all kind of crazy feeds, maybe cleaning it up, getting into Pulsar, maybe have a function like I was showing my little chat guy, not this guy. I have a little system where I could do a live chat. This gets sent from WebSockets into Pulsar. Pulsar goes to a function. The function runs a machine learning model, pushes the data out to another topic. The web socket listener here gets the results of that as you do it. You know, if I wanted to take that data, now that's in a result topic, I should have like a Flink SQL job waiting there to join that with some other data, do something with it, make those live decisions. Those are those use cases, you know, the really fast use cases, fraud detection, things that need to happen right away. I want that, you know, Pulsar and Flink together. If I'm going to do some heavyweight joins, windowing, that's in Flink. Probably the data coming from Pulsar. Maybe I need that exactly once. Maybe I need that in order. So we'll use that mechanism within Pulsar. If I need it in some kind of ETL, Spark is great for that. Or Pulsar maybe just, okay, it's going to be batch, or they just need it stored and they'll do their analytics later. I could have Pulsar push that to Delta Lake, or push that to HDFS, push it to S3, push it somewhere in a big chunk, and someone will run their ETL later. I mean, you guys have Airflow in there to run the kind of data engineering tasks later if you need it. Depends on the use case, right? Lots of use cases.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Great, thank you both. So I think that's pretty much all the questions that we have. I'll give it maybe another 30 seconds or so. Again, if you have any questions for John or Tim, anything at all, please feel free to use the Q&A function or the chat. I've seen some people adding some questions there too.
Yeah, don't hesitate. We definitely have experience, so, you know.
And some of it good.
Yeah.
All right,
Done
great.
some pretty cool stuff with Nifi, I know that much.
Super friends here, man.
Yeah, man. It's good finally actually doing meetups again, buddy. I mean,
in person next, in person in the real world at a brewery. Doug's gonna enable us there, man.
That sounds good to me. So do we have to go? We have to go near Doug though, or we're
no.
It's a bit of a ride.
You're gonna be Philly, New York, or Princeton. Well, whoever can get the most people is probably where it's gonna be, or who's got the best brewery. So do we have to go all the way up to
Jersey City?
Yeah.
I don't know.
What breweries in Jersey City? I don't know any. Magnifies
brewery everywhere,
Fairfield. Magnifies in Fairfield. That's like 30 minutes away from there, and then you have other half is in Brooklyn. So
wait, there's also a good brewery
in my town, man. We got one now.
Yeah, there's also a good brewery, I think, somewhere in Delaware that I went to over the
Dogfish
past.
Head.
Yes, that one. Yes.
Yeah. If it's about beer, I know it.
we should have done a beer app, but we keep saying that.
So I disagree, Doug. I think Magnify is better than Kane, but I think Kane's number 2. And
Kane is really good, man.
Tonewood's number 3. Tonewood's in South Jersey, which is where I'm from. And yeah, Kane's phenomenal though. But I just, for some odd reason, I like Magnify a little bit better than Kane.
Who's got a better place for us to do a meetup?
Oh, Kane's got a pretty big place. Well, they opened up down here in Philly now. Other half has a Philly spot. And it's big, and Source does too, which is another Jersey brewery.
Oh yeah, Source. I get their message every day, and it's already sold out by the time I get the message.
And Icarus that's in Lakewood.
Yeah, that's a nice one.
Yeah, I could talk about breweries all day. If you can't tell.
No, it's great. We have Nifi, Pulsar, and beer experts here.
Plus beer.
Yeah.
Great. So I think we've got enough time for people to put in their questions. So we'll just wrap it up here. And that concludes today's virtual meetup. Again, a very big thank you to our speakers, John and Tim, and all of you for joining us today. Again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to a member of our team. If you have any questions about Apache Nifi or Cloudera, please reach out to John. For any questions on Apache Pulsar or StreamNative, please reach out to either Tim or Doug. Everyone will be receiving a copy of the recording along with a deck, resources, and contact information mentioned today by next week on Monday. And if not, Tim just put it up there too. But we'll make sure to send it in the email along with the recording. Otherwise, a big thank you again to everyone. Thank you for joining us for the virtual meetup, and have a great evening or afternoon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.